Welcome to episode 37 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Path of the Just. And we are up to chapter 22, which is a new rung of this metaphysical ladder. And it is entitled, this chapter, The Virtue of Humility. So to be humble, as we all know, is a great attribute. We know that the greatest of all prophets, Moshe Rabbeinu, was described as being very, very humble. And with all that he achieved, you would wonder, how is this possible? But I think it seems that the more learned or more refined you become, perhaps you become more humble at the same time. Perhaps it's something that comes naturally when you have nothing to prove to other people. When you are aware of what you are beginning to achieve in your own progress, you feel God within you, and you don't have anything to prove to anybody else. You now are set in your mission, in your mind, and pride and arrogance are something that are shells that would not cover you, that are not part of your makeup anymore, or probably ever were. So now we're going to see how the Ramchal defines it. So the Ramchal begins. We have already discussed the unworthiness of haughtiness, and from this we are able to infer the praiseworthiness of humility. Now, however, we will define the main components of humility in a more direct manner, and in this way the essential nature of haughtiness will be clarified. The principle of humility is that a person should regard himself as unimportant in all circumstances. This is truly the antithesis of haughtiness, and the results that emerge from this will be just the opposite of those that emerge from haughtiness. Through analysis, we will discover that humility is dependent on both thought and deed. Before one can act in accordance with humility, one must have humility of thought. One who attempts to be humble in deed without first cultivating an inner commitment towards humility belongs to that class of pseudo-humble and evil people mentioned previously, whose hypocrisy is greater than any evil found in the world. So now the Ramchal is going to touch upon an exceptionally important prerequisite for humility. He's going to describe that if a person wishes to attain humility of thought, he must first recognize his own faults. And sometimes that's the most difficult thing. We have to be completely honest with ourselves and be aware of our faults. Once we identify them, we can deal with them. And it comes to the fore once we identify them. So the Ramchal continues. We will now define these aforementioned components. Humility of thought means that a person should contemplate and realize that he is unworthy of praise and honor, let alone any superiority above others, due to his natural faults and due to the limitations of what he has already accomplished as well. In terms of his own faults, it is obvious that it is impossible for any person, regardless of the level of perfection he has achieved, to be without numerous faults. These may derive from his own nature, from family and relatives, from certain things that have happened to him, or from his own deeds. And he quotes from Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 20, there is no righteous person in the whole land who will always do good and not sin. All of these are human flaws that prevent him from becoming conceited. Even if he does possess many virtues, these faults will suffice to dampen them. And now the Ramchal is going to describe how wisdom and knowledge can lead to arrogance, and how we should be aware of this in order to suppress it. So the Ramchal continues. Wisdom is what brings a person to conceit and haughtiness more than anything else, because it derives from a noble quality that is inherent in the person himself, the intellect. There is no such thing as a wise person who does not err, and who does not need to learn from his peers, and quite often he will learn even from his students. Therefore, what right does one have to be conceited concerning the wisdom that he possesses? But with a clear mind, a person, no matter how wise and distinguished he truly is, will realize, as he observes and contemplates, that there is no room for his haughtiness or conceit. A person who is intelligent by nature, who naturally knows more than others, acts in accordance with his natural instincts, like a bird flying upwards, since that is a part of his nature, and an ox who instinctively pulls with all of its strength. Similarly, a person of high intelligence is that way by nature, and if another person who is not as intelligent as he had his intelligence, he would be just as clever. Therefore, there is no reason for conceit and haughtiness. Rather, one who is very wise has a responsibility to impart his wisdom to those who are in need of it, as we see in the sayings of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he quotes from Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 2, Mishnah 8. If you have learnt much Torah, do not take credit for it, for you were created to do so. Similarly, one who is wealthy may rejoice in his lot, yet it is his responsibility to assist those who are in need. Similarly, if he is strong, and it is his responsibility to assist those who falter and to protect the oppressed. This is comparable to the servant of the household, in which each servant is assigned a different task and must fulfill his appointed job if all the household duties and requirements are to be completed. Looked at objectively, there is no place for haughtiness here. The type of analysis and contemplation previously mentioned are appropriate for any person who has a clear mind, one that is not warped. When all of the previously mentioned becomes clear to him, he can truly be called a humble person, one whose humility is internalized in his heart, which recalls what King David said to Michal, and he quotes from Shmuel, chapter 6, verse 22. And if I were to be even more lowly within my own eyes. Now the Ramchal is going to describe how humility is greater than even the sacrifices that were made in the Beis HaMikdash. The Ramchal continues, our sages of blessed memory have said in Sotar 5b, how great are those who are lowly in spirit, for when the Beis HaMikdash was in existence, a person would sacrifice a burnt offering and would be credited for the burnt offering. He would sacrifice a meal offering and he would be credited for the meal offering. Yet he who is humble in mind is considered as if he sacrificed all of the offerings possible, as it says in Psalms 51 verse 19. The preferred divine sacrifices are those of broken spirits. This is the phrase given to the lowly in spirit, for they possess humility in their hearts and thoughts. And they also said in Chulin 89a, with reference to the verse from Deuteronomy 7:7, not because you are more numerous than all the nations did the Eternal desire you. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to them, to Bnei Israel, my sons, I desire you, for even when I imbue you with greatness, you diminish yourselves before me. I bestowed greatness upon Abraham, and he said, and I am dust and ashes. That's from Genesis 18:27. I bestowed greatness upon Moshe and Aaron, and they said, they quote from Shemot 16 verse 7, and what are we? I bestowed greatness upon King David, and he said in Psalms 22:7, but I am a worm and not a man. All of this emerges from a truthful heart that will not be swayed by all the virtues that one may possess. Such an individual knows very well that due to other shortcomings that are inseparable part of him, his virtues will not elevate him from his state of lowliness, even with regard to those mitzvot that he does possess. Yet he has to attain the ultimate goal. And even if his only shortcoming was that he was made of flesh and blood and born of a woman, that alone would suffice to acquaint him with his small worth and his inadequacies, and then he would realize how utterly inappropriate conceit is. Any virtue that he acquires is nothing less than a divine act of benevolence that has been done in his favour, even though he is by his very nature and physical make-up lowly and shameful. Therefore, he must thank the one who has graced him in this manner and humble himself before him all the more so. So that's very, very true. Sometimes we can perhaps get conceited about perhaps gifts that we have regarding intelligence or various other attributes that we feel that we naturally have. But perhaps we should have the mindset that actually they are given to us for a purpose, that we were given these gifts for use in a particular way, in serving God in different manners. Perhaps one is endowed with great insights into Torah commentary. Therefore, his mission in life will be to write a commentary on the Torah. It's not to think about how great his or her mind is. They have to go and perform their duty in life. And that's what these attributes are. They're God-given. Therefore, they have to be utilized in the correct manner as a servant's tool or servant's ladder. And now we are going to conclude this section. I think we're going to split this up into two episodes, and we're going to close this episode with the analogy of a pauper. So the Ramchal continues. This is analogous to a pauper who has received a gift. Such a person has to feel shame, and the more he is treated with kindness, the greater will his shame be. And the same applies to any individual, for his eyes are open and permit him to see that his attainment of his virtues is from God, blessed be he. As King David said in Psalms 116 verse 12, how can I repay the Eternal for all of his kindness to me? So a wonderful episode there. This is chapter 22, the virtue of humility, and we're halfway through it. And I look forward to the second half next episode.